From Great Neck to Oyster Bay, the communities of Nassau County's North Shore are all unique with diverse populations and important issues. I'm Jason Samel, your host for North Shore Now. Each week, I bring you the newsmakers, politicians, artists, and activists, and interesting people who have an impact on our communities. North Shore Now is your source for what's happening on Long Island's Gold Coast.
Welcome to North Shore Now.
Welcome to the North Shore Now. I am your host, Jason Samel. This program will focus on issues concerning the residents of Nassau County's North Shore. I'll be joined later in the program by Deborah Orgel Gordon, a self-proclaimed small business activist who is also president of the Glen Head Glenwood Landing Business Association and known by many as the Facebook Queen, as she admins some of the most popular and respectful Facebook groups on the North Shore of Long Island. Deb is here to discuss supporting local business and building community. But first, I have the pleasure of introducing Josh Lafzan, a young man at just 24 years old who recently became Nassau County's youngest ever legislator upon his election to the Nassau County Legislator for our District 18 just a short 6 months ago. He won the seat previously held by a Republican for many, many, many years. A graduate of Harvard Grad School of Education with a master's degree in education policy and management from Cornell University. In May of 2012, at the age of 18, while in his senior year in high school, Josh became one of the youngest officials elected in New York State when, with 82% of the vote, he successfully was elected to the Syosset School Board of Ed, running on a platform of transparency and openness. Now, I got to tell you, Josh, prior to you announcing your candidacy, I had actually been discussing with the Nassau Dems to potentially run for the same position that you ran for.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. We sort of both interviewed for the same position. In the end, though, they said it wasn't in my best interest to run for that position, as they said the seat is a sitting duck to Republicans. So instead, I ran for a local position. But boy, were they wrong, man. With a powerhouse like you running, it seems like anything's possible. You really hit it out of the park. I want to begin by congratulating you on your big win in November. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Josh, tell me, at such a young age, what made you want to become active in politics?
Sure. So I often joke that my political career began in 2001 in first grade.
Wow.
in Miss Weiss elementary school class. I was elected to the Walt Whitman Student Council.
Nice.
And the joke is, my career just skyrocketed from first grade. No. But I say that because that was my first introduction into representative government, which is the ability to use my voice to lift up the voices of others. Whether, obviously, the issues have changed from first grade to now. Advocating for certain goods at a bake sale versus advocating on behalf of my constituency. But I fell in love at that very moment with using my voice to represent the voices of others.
6 years old.
I fell in love with it, and so I stayed involved with government all throughout elementary school, middle school. High school, was elected senior class president.
Wow.
And at the time, we had a superintendent in Syosset collecting a pay package of well over $500,000. It was very well documented. Even the governor had shown a spotlight on Syosset, and individuals in the community kept coming to me and saying, Josh, we're on the cover of Newsday for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And again, I felt that we had a school board that represented the superintendent, not the best interest of the community. So I was 18, and my mentor for years is Tom DiNapoli, who was the first 18-year-old elected to government in New York State.
Wow.
Who's the current New York State comptroller. And we had breakfast, and Tom said to me, and it's something that's burned in my memory, anytime I have an inferiority complex, or anytime I feel that I can't do something, he said, you are never too young to use your voice to step up for your community. Yeah. So I ran. And so as a teenager, I was 17 when I announced and 18 when I ran. Just a few of my buddies, we knocked doors every day.
Wow.
And, we had no money, no organization.
I didn't even know you could run when you're in high school.
I
knew that, right?
Well, you know what?
Again, this is the information we got to get out to.
Well, and so it's funny you mentioned that, because after all of this, so I was elected at 18, re-elected at 21, and elected at 23 to the legislature. So what I did was I wrote a book. And it's called Political Gladiators. It's available on Amazon.
Wow.
And what the book does is it teaches young people how to run for office, because running for office as a young person is such a drastically different ordeal from running for office as an adult.
Yeah.
There are different pitfalls you have, different questions you have to answer, life experience you may not have. So what I did was I interviewed people I really admired. I interviewed Tom DiNapoli, who was elected at a young age. Mark Molinaro is running for governor. I interviewed him. Wow. He was elected to the Tivoli Village Board at 18.
Wow.
Nicole Maliotakis ran for mayor. I interviewed all these people.
Yeah.
And I said, what would you have wished you known when you started running?
Yeah.
And of course, the answer is dramatic, because there's so much that you learn over a course of life that you don't know as a teenager.
Sure.
And my hope is that this book coupled with appearances on the radio like this, inspires young people to speak up and seek elected office.
And it's happening all over the country. I mean, ever since Trump has been elected, and the whole Bernie movement, left-wing politics has really brought Democrats have brought this massive resurgence of younger people getting involved and running for office all across the country. It's happening.
Well, I'll say, and I don't even think it's partisan. So one of my best friends is Anthony Fasano.
Okay.
He's the school board president in New Jersey of Hopatcong. He was elected at 18, and I think he's 22, 23 right now. And he ran because his grandma was from Mount Sinai.
Wow.
Who read about my story and told her and said, you know what? And he said, you know
Inspired.
what? I can do. And to me, Peter Mountainous was elected at 19 in Wantua. Heard my story. Peter's a Democrat. Anthony's a Republican. And what they said to me was the most gratifying things I've been told.
Yeah.
It's that your story told me that I could do this.
Yeah.
And my hope is that those 2 examples become 2,000 examples. Because I think, and again, I'm biased because I'm 24.
Of course.
But that when young people run for office, good things happen.
Yeah.
And when young people run for office, because in
new, fresh ideas.
It's because we've been shut out of the conversation for so long.
Yeah.
It's important for young people that everyone has a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And for example, my very first bill, which I know we spoke about, which I announced, was to mandate that at every emergency press conference in Nassau County, we have an American Sign Language interpreter present.
Oh yeah, there's not already.
No, and
it blows my mind.
Suffolk County too, and it's totally up to the discretion of the elected officials who have the press conference. So Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles, I watched him on TV. He's got a sign language interpreter. Bill de Blasio.
So this is to be an interpreter standing behind whoever's speaking at all times.
Precisely, and to me, in times of emergency, this was brought to my attention by individuals from the Mill Neck Manor School for the Deaf, which is right in my district. And when I was told that individuals during Hurricane Sandy didn't have access to critical information in a time of crisis and truly didn't know what to do, it touched me. So again, the point I'm making here is that as a young person, I know what it's like to feel that the government does not represent me and doesn't listen to me. So when a constituent group or somebody comes to me and says, Josh, the government's not working for me, that touches me and that inspires me to move. And we hope this is going to become law in April.
Yeah, excellent. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us what your 3 biggest accomplishments have been throughout your life. Because I can't say politics necessarily because it hasn't been that long. So tell me what your 3 biggest accomplishments have been.
Sure. So this is a better question. Mom usually comes prepared to these things. Like the brag sheet. So if she's watching, this is better for you. 3 biggest accomplishments. Well, graduating from Harvard was such a thrill.
Yes, I can imagine just getting in.
It was. Still, I like to joke that it was a computer glitch, and I just gave my money right away, so they couldn't take it back. But having a diploma from Harvard and from Cornell were schools that I dreamed about as a kid and getting into. And of course, my time at Nassau Community College, because I started at Nassau Community.
Really?
Yeah, and people,
your first 2 years?
When I ran for the school board, I promised my voters that I would stay home for 2 years because I wanted to focus on the job.
That's enlightening because, I think in the back of my head, and most kids that I know think in the back of their head, man, if I don't right out of high school, I got to get into Harvard, or if I go to community college, there's no way I can ever follow my dreams.
You're so spot on. And what I find, I went to Syosset High School is an elite public school, top 200 in the nation.
Oh, yeah.
And at elite public high schools, I find that there's often an A, omission of information on behalf of community colleges, or B, students are told that, if you don't work hard, you're going to wind up at community college.
Yeah.
It couldn't be further from the truth.
Okay.
My experience at community college was just blatantly dichotomous from what I was told would happen if I went to community college. Yeah. I'm a proud alum, and I go back there to speak and tell kids that it's not where you start, but it's where you finish. So actually what I did was I did a TED Talk. It's called From Community College to Harvard.
Okay.
Rethinking college admissions. So I implore everyone watching and everyone listening to please look at that TED Talk. But again, having worked so hard at Nassau and on that stage at Cornell and on that stage at Harvard, truly an incredible accomplishment. So that was an incredible feeling. Okay. So I'd say that's number 1. Yeah. Number 2 was getting my nonprofit off the ground. Okay. So in high school, are you a Jet fan?
I'm not too much of a sports fan.
That's all right. Listen,
music fan.
No,
music
you're less miserable than me if you're not a Jets fan. So Braylon Edwards was the wide receiver on the Jets.
Okay.
In 2011, my senior year, he was arrested for drinking and driving.
Okay.
So he was summarily castigated by everyone on the area, on the radio. Francesa and everyone. How could you be so stupid to drink and drive?
Yeah.
What they didn't know at the time, and what I only found out through research, was that NFL players and professional athletes are entitled to something called the Player Protect Program, which says that you are entitled to a free, safe ride home 24/7, 365 from the 48 contiguous states in America.
Wow.
So the question I asked that nobody seemed to ask was that if Braylon Edwards, with millions of dollars, the support of the entire Jets organization, and the Player Protect program, could still make the stupid decision to drink and drive. What about my Syosset High School classmates?
Sure.
What was their emergency recourse? And drinking and driving still is, but was a bigger epidemic among young people, especially around the time I was in high school. And I joke that I'm so old, I'm pre-Uber. That's how old I am. Of course, my parents don't like when I make that joke. But I started.
Try to remember a day without cell phones, buddy.
So I can't. So I started Safe Ride Syosset, and how it worked was that Syosset High School students who either drank,
not 501c3.
Not nonprofit. Yes, so Syosset High School students who either drank or were driven by someone who drank would call my cell phone on Friday and Saturday nights. And myself, and we actually ended up with 40 volunteer drivers.
Wow.
All Syosset High School students volunteering to be sober for a night with a sober buddy of theirs.
That's amazing.
Would be dispatched to go pick these kids up and take them home free of charge.
Yep.
No questions asked and no judgments passed.
That's amazing.
And on the night Safe Ride was operating, not only was there not one single teenage drinking and driving death, but we drove home 350 kids my senior year.
Wow.
And the first...
You don't, I mean, my mom always told me, call us. We won't ask any questions. We won't yell at you. But who wants to call their mom after they were just drinking time?
And I to this day, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs. And, when I turned 17, I became the de facto, I joke, the designated driver for the class of 2012. But,
they must have loved you.
You have a relationship with your mom the way I did, where my parents said, call me any time of the night, we'll come and get you. But what we found was that kids felt that they feared getting caught by their parents drunk or high more than hurting somebody or themselves on the road.
That's
so
wild.
We decided that this program was going to be run by students for students. And on the first couple weekends, there was one Safe Ride Syosset driver.
Wow.
And you're looking at him.
Wow.
And I would come home at 3:30, 4 a.m., and I'd go through a full tank of gas. And what would happen is something magical, and it's something that when you talk about proud moments, do you know who my drivers became?
Tell me.
They became the kids who I drove home in my backseat, drunk on a Friday night, would volunteer to stay sober and drive on a Saturday night. So we took kids who were part of the problem and made them part of the solution until the point when we had 40 volunteer drivers.
That's incredible.
And I think that's just such a great example and a microcosm of what happens when communities engage young people and take young people who are part of the so-called problem and turn them into part of the solution.
Agreed. So what's with that? Is that program still going today?
So no, I started that program in high school. Obviously I went to Cornell and Harvard, and couldn't find anyone to take up the mantle. But to this day, and this is funny because I run into people from high school, whether in the bagel store or in the
still
gym.
Remember you for it.
Not only do they remember me, they pull out their phones. I'm still stored in their phone as Safe Ride Syosset,
That's awesome.
which is so funny. And to this day, I'm the designated driver for my friend group. But that was number 2, and number 3, I got to tell you, was November 7th, getting elected to the legislature. It was one of the most emotional nights of my life.
Yeah.
Because being told that you had no chance to win in a district like this.
Yeah.
Working, I graduated in May.
Sitting duck, they call it.
Right. I graduated in May from Harvard, and I launched my campaign in June and worked every day. We knocked on 23,000 doors as a team. Put my heart and soul into this, and for the people.
And you really grassroots. I mean, I couldn't believe. I saw you on Facebook. The amount of kids that were in there that were knocking on doors and making phone calls.
That's what made it so special, because I was surrounded by all my interns and seeing the happiness in their eyes and how much my race meant to them and my supporters. And we won by 12 points. The fact that this district put their trust in me. It was so emotional, and I'm still so grateful. And that was, to date, the greatest night of my life.
So now we're in. And we're in the thick of it. You've been in now for 6 months.
Right.
You recently passed your first bill, which you discussed a bit earlier. We'll get into
submitted.
more.
I hope we passed.
Submitted. Sorry, it's not through yet.
We're going to pass it this April.
Okay. What do you feel right now are the most critical issues of today facing Nassau County residents?
Biggest issue right now is opioids, in my opinion.
Okay.
We have, again, 62,000 deaths of overdoses in 2016, a Vietnam War every single year. Long Island, Nassau County, and Suffolk County amongst the top 5 hardest hit areas for heroin overdose. Yes, and I'm 24 years old, and I'm tired of learning of individuals that I know of who are either addicted to heroin or who passed.
Who passed? It just happened recently in our area.
And the most wild, and these are all deaths that are completely preventable. Yeah. This is and in 2018, we have to state categorically for the record that this is a disease and not a choice.
Yeah.
And because it's a disease, we need to treat it like every other disease, where we study it, we diagnose the root causes, and we treat it.
Yeah.
And we need to totally reimagine our system of treatment with end-to-end care. So currently
Explain what exactly that means.
So what that means is this. What that means is in the day and age where, you can pull up your cell phone and to your house, you can order a package from Amazon or an Uber driver or a meal. to expect somebody in the throes of a horrible disease to go online and do proprietary research and find treatment availability that so scarcely exists is quite frankly unreasonable.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've outlaid a 5-point plan in January, and I'm happy to tell you about that now if we have the time.
Sure.
So first and foremost, I think we need a 24-hour hotline dedicated specifically to individuals who are suffering from disease. We need a 24-hour open access center or like an urgent care for individuals to come 24 hours a day for immediate screening, intervention, and referral to treatment.
I love it.
We're on a college campus. We need the availability of sober dorms for young people who are in recovery, so they're not thrown back into the very same ecosystems that fermented their original problem.
Exist yet, huh?
There's at a bunch of SUNYs it exists, but at the schools in Nassau that house students, we don't have it. We want the availability of it.
Wow.
Four, we want a recovery center, just a safe place run by drug addiction professionals for young people to come and socialize. And lastly, I want to train every Nassau County employee in Narcan, which is the nasal spray that revives someone from an overdose. And I think those 5 steps will make Nassau County the battleground in the fight against addiction.
That's a nasal spray.
It's a nasal spray.
See, it's so funny. I hear so much about it. I haven't gone to any of the trainings
Well, you're going
yet.
to come to my training.
I will come to your
April
training.
18th at the Bayville Firehouse at 7 p.m.
I will be there. But it's funny because when I always thought this Narcan stuff, I see it online. I see all these different articles about it. I thought it was something that you have to give an injection for. I didn't even know it was
it used to be,
nasal spray.
And it used to be, and then it translated into a nasal spray. You had to connect different pieces, and now it's no different than a nasal spray for allergies. It's one click, one nostril, and you'll be trained, and in a half hour you'll be trained and ready to go.
And what is that? That just immediately takes somebody out
So
of...
it revives somebody suffering from an overdose while you're waiting for emergency services.
Okay.
Now, because heroin has gotten so strong due to the increase of fentanyl,
Yes.
right? Because heroin is no longer 100% pure right now.
Right.
It takes multiple doses of Narcan, where I might have been able to revive you in one dose. Cops are saying that it takes 6 to 8 doses.
What exactly is fentanyl?
Fentanyl is a synthetic drug that makes heroin more potent.
Okay.
And again, what's so scary is that we know the most dangerous time for an addict is not when they're using. It's when they've quit and then they relapse because the tolerance has been decreased, right? So how do we make sure, and again, those young people in recovery, how do we, my friends in recovery, I worry for them because how do we make sure they're not relapsing? Yeah. Do they have a sober dorm where they're surrounded not by drugs and alcohol, but by positive constructive activity? Yeah. Do they have a recovery center to go to that's free and run by drug addiction professionals? Do they have a hotline to call if they feel like they're going to relapse? These are the things we're not talking about that I want to bring to the forefront.
And I want to talk to you more about this right after the break. This is Jason Samel sitting here with Josh Lafzan, our very young, energetic, inspiring legislator of our area. We're going to be back speaking more with Josh and then later on with Deborah Shannon Orgel Gordon, self-proclaimed Facebook queen, in just a few moments. Just hang in for our next segment on North Shore Now with Jason Samel on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org.
You're listening to North Shore Now.
Welcome back to North Shore Now. I am your host, Jason Samel, on WCWP 88.1 FM radio and WCWP.org. I'm sitting here with County Legislator Josh Lafzan, a 24-year-old who is one of the youngest ever elected to public office in New York State. And we've been discussing the important issues of today facing Nassau County. We were just speaking a bit about the opioid crisis, and I do want to spend a little bit more
Sure.
time on it because I just think it's certainly affected me in the terms of I have friends who've passed away, unfortunately, people locally, musicians, and some just really close people that were close to me in the past. It's tough. What can we? You mentioned a few different things that we could do about it. Narcan training. For you said all Nassau County
employees, but also
for all Nassau County employees.
We've been having Narcan trainings in the community for the public. So
I've seen that. Yeah,
we had a Narcan training at the Cold Spring Harbor Lab.
Yeah.
We partnered with Mayor Dan DeVita in Laurel Hollow. We had about 80, 90 people there who got trained in Narcan. Yeah. And my hope is they now tell 80, 90 of their friends to get trained in Narcan as well. So April 18th at 7 p.m. at the Bayville Firehouse. Okay. We have about 80 people signed up. So I hope I'm seeing you there.
I will be there.
And my hope is we're going to try to do a bunch of these a year, and for you to be able to go home, be armed with the information from that seminar, and God forbid, if somebody close to you or you see somebody on the street, or if somebody comes in your life who is suffering from an overdose, you can save their life.
So I can walk around legally with Narcan on me?
So you
is,
have to go to the training.
Okay.
And when you're trained, so you'll be trained in the signs that somebody needs Narcan,
okay,
and the signs that somebody is overdosing,
okay,
and they're going to train you in the administration of Narcan. Now you can have that on your person, and if you see somebody who is suffering from an overdose, so people say, how often does that happen? My friend Terry Kroll, who is my hero.
I was in a bagel store a few months ago, and this girl sat down and just started randomly talking to me, and her eyes were crazy rolling and all this. I knew it, and she was like about to pass out on the desk. You just knew that.
So let me tell you. So it happens more often again, and just because it's such a hotbed for heroin. Terry Kroll, again, she lost her son Timothy 8 years ago to addiction. She turned her grief into advocacy and is a board member of FIST, Families in Support of Treatment.
Okay.
Was one of the first civilians trained in Narcan, and speaks to parents everywhere about her story and why it's so important to be vigilant and to be trained. Yeah. Terry, right, who is lost her son to addiction, administered Narcan and saved somebody's life.
That's amazing.
Somebody she did not know, somebody she encountered. This happens
that often,
right?
That you lose one person and then find another person to save.
So, and to me, what I'm working on is: are we training our young people in Narcan who are at the parties on the college campuses or in the high school parties that, before the first responders can get there, can save a life if they step up and if they know the signs? Right. What kills me? I read a story about I think it was Penn State, where an individual passed away who was being hazed by fraternity members, and it wasn't a sudden passing. It was a person who was in a state of intoxication or completely incapacitated, and nobody recognized the signs that, hey, I should do something. Yeah. We're failing if we're not educating our young people that if you see something, you must do something. Not you can do something, you must do something.
What can we do to stop the use? What can we do to stop it coming into our country or into our area?
So again, I'm as from the point of a Nassau County legislator, prevention. Yeah. We know that evidence-based prevention works. Right. Evidence-based prevention is not a 20-minute seminar telling young people not to do drugs.
Okay.
It does not work.
Sure.
It's proven that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Evidence-based prevention works. Teaching kids about mindfulness, right, and how to cope with stress, healthy
That's
coping.
Been integrated into a lot of the schools recently.
And we're working on it.
More and more.
So my office, we're sponsoring a mindfulness training for the public.
That's great.
Right? Because as we know...
What does that mean, mindfulness? It's a term that's thrown around a lot.
Sure. It's just being introspective and cognizant of your own mental state and having an ability to cope with stress via healthy coping mechanisms, whether it's yoga or it's exercise or it's meditation, as opposed to turning to an opiate. Okay. And we know that 1 out of 5 kids, 20%, are predisposed to having addictive qualities, which is a crazy statistic when you think about it, because now we know that the abuse of alcohol, the abuse of marijuana...
Is that genetic? Is that because 1 out of 5 people have done drugs in the past?
Just young people are predisposed. Well, from the bloodline, or we just know from statistics, 1 out of 5 kids. So now 1 out of 5 kids who abuse alcohol or abusing marijuana are putting themselves at risk for becoming an addict of substances like heroin, of substances like prescription drugs, and that's how we get the ball rolling here. So where I'm coming from is, how do we reach those kids early? Yeah. And early is not high school. Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes early
it's all about reaching the kids.
Reaching the kids early, but also reaching the parents.
Okay.
So what do I talk to Terry Kroll? What does Terry Kroll talk about? Do parents have any idea of if their medicine cabinet is locked? Or if kids have access to prescription drugs in their medicine cabinet? Sure. Do parents have an idea of where their kids are after school, or who their kids are hanging out with, or warning signs or symptoms in their kids? Not just a dip in grades, but a dip, but a change in behavior. Is their behavior volatile? It's holistic and it's 100%. But prevention works. And 62,000 lives being lost from overdose. Someone like me, it's been in me, it's been inculcated in me that I don't drink and I don't smoke and I don't do drugs, and I am not at risk for addiction right now, right? But because I'm not currently, using, but my friends from college who let's say had a tough test and were using Adderall. I have a few friends that are now addicted to Adderall because Adderall was the coping mechanism to help them study, not prescribed, who they got on college campuses, who now use in the workplace.
I know people who are prescribed that are addicted to Adderall.
And I'll tell you what's so
and that leads to so many other
but
things.
What's so disheartening to me is, again, I speak to, I have a brother who's a junior at Wharton, and I have a brother who's he's the brains.
You got a good line.
And
there,
I have
buddy.
a brother who just got into Cornell as a senior in high school.
Congrats.
So going to the alma mater. But
nice.
I speaking to my brother when I was, the expediting of the schedule of when kids begin to experiment is something that's giving me real pause. So in middle school, I was not cool by any means, but at the same time, I was aware of what was going on.
He wasn't cool, folks. He was just class president.
It's going to give my buddies. They will use many adjectives to describe me. None of them will be cool.
Okay.
But I was still aware of what was going on, and I remember 6th, 7th, 8th grade, drinking, smoking, the utilization of drugs was still frowned upon from young people. Speaking to my brother now, the average age of use of these substances is lowering. Yeah. So what does that mean? We have to get to kids earlier.
Yeah.
It means having a seminar senior year the night before prom is not enough.
Yeah.
Because
how early do we have to get to these kids?
Well,
I know that I know some districts for a long time when sex education was just growing in schools, a lot of schools had a problem with teaching about that at a younger age. What age can we start teaching about
again, I'm not a case act, I'm not an addiction professional, so I don't want to judge as to what specific age. What I'll say is this. When I started Safe Ride, parents told me, rightfully, in their opinion, that I was enabling teen drinking because teens would now drink because they had a safe ride home. Now, I know that's preposterous.
Ridiculous.
Because as a young person, nobody drinks because they have a free ride home. Kids drink because they've drank for generations.
Sure.
We're going to attack the problem head on.
Yeah.
Same thing goes with schools, where schools are now waking up and saying, well, not my child. Well, it's everyone's child. Yeah. And drug addiction is not a disease that discriminates between sex, race, age, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. It does not discriminate. Yeah. So at the end of the day, our schools being more progressive and coming aboard and saying something needs to give here. Yeah. We need to act. Yeah. And so, I'm blessed. I'm on the board of LICAD, Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. Okay. We're training thousands of kids on Long Island every year. Yeah. Thousands of kids. Yeah. And we need to do more. And at the same time, it's parents and kids.
We had a mindfulness training for my kindergartner. Mm-hmm. To attack the opioid crisis.
Well, and I'll tell you this,
for a kindergartner and first grade, unbelievable.
I'll say that with the burgeoning of standardized testing, I can't tell you how many constituents of mine say that their kids are suffering from stress in elementary school at a level we've never seen before. Yeah. And again, is this taking in to the heroin epidemic? Because as we know, we can't incarcerate our way out of this problem. We have a police commissioner in Nassau County who said this, and Pat Ryder is a good friend of mine.
You don't feel incarceration helps drug dependent
What I'm saying is we cannot incarcerate our way out of a public health crisis. Okay. And what I mean by that is this, is an individual who is using needs treatment. Okay. And by incarcerating a user who is able to get treatment and to get help, because 23 million Americans are living in long-term recovery. And this is when I tell people this statistic, their jaw drops to the floor. 23 million Americans are in recovery, and recovery is real, and it's a miracle. But recovery, we're not going to help a young person recover if we're spending taxpayer dollars throwing that person in jail. Yeah. Now, law enforcement does have a role to play, right? We have to make sure that the individuals who are dealing are held accountable. We have to make sure that there is not the paths that these substances traverse into this country are stopped. And there's a role law enforcement plays. Sure. We're using data to track opioid overdoses to find the dealers. Wow. Law enforcement is a critical and important partner. Yeah. But we've known from the last years that incarcerating our way out of this problem is not the solution. The solution is a holistic approach. Yeah. Parents, teachers, students, community members, elected officials, law enforcement, all on board together to say, how are we approaching this from a 360-degree view? So I think my bills do just that. Yeah. And again, I'm not so naive as to believe that my bills will solve the heroin crisis. Sure. But let's look at my bills. Number one, a 24-hour hotline. Somebody needs help right now. And instead of having to go on WebMD or find information, which is vast and not often accurate on the internet, we know that not everything you read on the internet is true.
Really?
You can call a professional like they do in Suffolk County 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you're suffering from addiction, you could say, I feel like I'm going to relapse. What do I do? Or I took this. What does this mean? Yeah. Or my son is showing these symptoms and these signs and these behaviors. Where can I go? Sure. And what does Terry Kroll say? Terry Kroll says if that hotline existed 8 years ago, her son may still be alive. Yeah. And for her to say that moves me to say that this needs to happen immediately. Yeah. That's number one. A 24-hour open access center. Number two, like an urgent care.
Right. Yeah.
Where you can come 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to say, I need immediate screening, intervention, and a warm handoff or a referral to a longer-term treatment. Yeah. Staten Island does this. Suffolk County just put out an RFP for it. Okay. It doesn't exist in Nassau County. So how powerful would that be? If you're suffering from disease, your parents can take you, or if you're a mom, you can come to a facility to meet an addiction professional to get, to be immediate screened and intervened, and then a referral to longer term treatment. That's life changing.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Sober dorms, the availability of sober dorms on college campuses. We know that kids are going to drink on college campuses. It's for generations. Yeah. But the availability for a kid who doesn't want to drink or smoke or do drugs to say, I want to be in a healthy environment. Yeah. Where one of my interns used the term positive peer pressure. Yeah. Because it's basically by the honor system, where it's positive peer pressure to make sure that dorm is kept abstinent from drugs and alcohol. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. A recovery center for young people to go and to have constructive activities and to be away from drugs and alcohol, but still socialize with other young people. Yeah. Life-changing. Yeah. All Nassau County employees trained in Narcan administration. Life-changing. Having more legislators train their constituents in Narcan. Get the ball rolling. And what these bills do is it moves the conversation along. Yeah. Because this should be in the headlines every day.
Yeah. And it's not.
No, it's not. And we're if you count with those who have overdosed
it takes a death. It takes a death for to get back in the headlines. And only for a second.
Well, and where I'm coming from is this: we've, thank goodness, revived hundreds of people using Narcan. Yeah. But if you include those people who would have died without the Narcan, 1,000 Long Islanders a year. Yeah. At the height of some of the greatest diseases we've faced as humankind. Yeah. Were we losing 1,000 people a year?
Yeah, I definitely want to have you back another time to discuss this more. Sure. I want to have a whole show at some point wrapped around this, because I believe that strongly in really shining a light on this issue. What other issues are plaguing Nassau County right now that you're working on?
Keeping young people on Long Island. So, I joke that I'm 24 and I live in Mom's basement, and sorry, Mom, but it's equally as miserable for her as it is for me. Yeah. And, my apartment at Harvard was 400 square feet and change, and I lived like a king. Because Mom wasn't there.
I've had 5 best friends, and I've had 5 really, really good best friends in life. None of them live on Long Island anymore. So they're all gone. 2 of my best friends just moved to New York City. I had a great friend who moved to Charleston, South Carolina. Yeah. Kids are moving to Georgia, Texas. Yep. And it's not rocket science why they're moving. No, it's less expensive. Right. Quality of life is better. It's warm weather.
They're moving so they can have affordable housing, right? Yeah. Because renting a home for $3,000 a month or paying $2,500 a month is not affordable housing, unless we're kidding ourselves. Yeah. Number one. Number two, they're looking for good jobs with good wages. Yeah. And number 3, they're looking for quality of life, things to do. Yeah. So these cool downtowns that we need to build, again, if we can
Cove, excuse me. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Yeah. Well, so if we can totally transform our train stations and the areas around our train stations, build these affordable units, and again, I call them micro units because when a young person's out of the basement, they'll live in a smaller apartment. Yeah. And if they're living by the train station, I want to give them a discounted LIRR ticket because $400 a month to commute to the city is not sustainable when you have to pay a student loan. Yeah. So all of a sudden, you're living in an affordable apartment by a train. You don't have to have a car because you have a discounted LIRR ticket. Take the railroad to the city, come home. Now we're building shops because there's young people, there's bars, and there's restaurants, and there's stores, and there's a lounge. And
look at Huntington, look at Patchogue.
Farmingdale.
Patchogue is becoming very young now.
It is a template that can be followed. Yeah. So how do we engage all the stakeholders, the community? Okay, young people, of course, because the young, I joke,
how do we change the situation?
If you build it, they will come. So what I'm bringing up the conversation right now with other elected officials in areas, with developers, with community. I'm talking to young people all the time, and the joke that they keep telling me is, "If you build it, I will come." Yeah. And it's the truth.
Did you see the movie?
I did see the movie.
Okay. I Field of Dreams.
That was a classic, and to me, this is how things get done, is when you engage everyone, and you don't just move a million miles an hour without circumspection. Yeah. You engage everyone and you move as a coalition, and this is a topic on the top of my priority list.
Excellent. And I know you recently passed your first bill as a legislator, which is an amazing accomplishment. There's lots of bills to come, I'm sure. What are you working on next?
Sure. So again, so Monday,
we got the Narcan training.
Right, we're working on, but Monday, my sign language bill is going to be in committee. Okay. If that gets passed in committee, it's going to be voted on the full legislature on April 23rd.
What's next on the block for you?
Well, I'm working on the opioid bills I announced. I'm working on turning those bills from concept into law. Beautiful. I'm working on.
How long does something like that take?
Well, it depends on the specificity and the complexity. So obviously, issues like opioid is incredibly complex and has taken me since January to do. Okay. So I'm working on that. So I hope to have these written in the next few weeks. I hope to have them written and submitted. What else am I working on? Changing. Again, getting whether it's New York State or getting funding for that discounted LIRR ticket for young people. Yeah. I'm working on issues when it comes to corruption in Nassau County. Yeah. Of course, we need term limits in Nassau County.
We didn't get into that. That's a whole other show.
No,
right?
We didn't get into it. Well, because corruption. We have a new administration, but corruption has been within Nassau and plaguing Nassau forever. So how do we make sure, how am I working with Laura Kern's administration to ensure that campaign finance laws are changed so that contractors don't have outside influence? And this is what makes me different. And to all your listeners, campaign finance is something that I'm passionate about, because when it comes to me, nobody has access to me because they donate. I'm the only legislator in that building that puts his personal cell phone out on Facebook and says, call me if you need me. And I pick up the phone no matter whether you donated or not. But too many politicians, they look right past a young person because you can't supply two things. One, money, two, votes. So I'm different, but we know that money plays a role in Nassau County. How are we ensuring that we're mitigating a role it plays? Term limits. How are we making sure that our elected officials aren't serving for life? Gerrymandering. How are we making sure that we have fair elections for a nonpartisan district map? Are we making sure we have fuller financial disclosure? I'm hosting a town hall in every community in my district, or my colleagues hosting town halls. So I'm busy, and I'm doing it because people deserve. I made this my full-time job, and people deserve all my attention, and that's what I'm hoping to give them.
Doing amazing work. Thank you so much for coming on our show, Josh, and giving everyone this telling inside view of a young man's life working to change our world for the better. I truly enjoyed our time together, and please come back again.
Will do.
After the break, we'll be joined by Deborah Shannon Orgel Gordon, self-proclaimed small business activist. I think she coined that term. She's known as the local Facebook queen, as she admins numerous community pages where she says they strive for positivity instead of pot stirring and racism that seems to happen on other pages. She's the president of the Glenwood Business Association, where she's helped boost their membership in a massive way, and she's here today to talk about building community and helping small businesses thrive.